Anytime you're in a situation in life, something around you happens, we're going to call that a stimulus. Okay, so that's something happens, and now once a stimulus happens, you are either going to have a reaction or a response. The way you can think about reaction and response is a reaction is something that happens suddenly, boom, boom, without thinking, just right away. And a response is something that you've had time to think about and make a choice about what you want to happen. A way to remember this is if the doctor gives you some medicine, and then you call the doctor the next morning and you say, "Doctor, I'm having a reaction to the medication." That's not good. Having a reaction, there's something going wrong. Okay. Or you say, "Doctor, my body is responding. There's a response to the medication." Then you know that's a good thing. That's what you want to have happen. Okay, that's just a way to remember it. Okay. So now, people react to things all the time. They say, "She made me do it. He made me do it. You know, it was his fault that I did what I did." Well, this is actually false, because anytime a stimulus happens, there's always space between the stimulus and what you do about it. And what I call this space between the stimulus and your reaction or response to it is a choice gap. So there is actually always a choice gap. There's always a fraction of a second or a moment of time that you can think about what you want to do about what has just happened. And that's your choice gap. And you always have a choice gap. Okay, now, most people just react to things, just automatic. Whatever you already have downloaded about what to do about things, you're just going to do that right away without thinking. Something happens, someone punches you, you punch them back. Someone calls you a name, you call them a name back. That's this having automatic reactions, if they're not consciously chosen and smart, then automatic reactions are a lot of times what land people in jail, or getting suspended from school, or things that happen that people didn't plan because they didn't think ahead and they didn't make a choice in that gap. Now you have a choice. You can choose to not choose, and you can choose to do something stupid, and you can choose to blame other people for what you're about to do, and then do it anyway and say it's their fault, which is not true, because you always have that gap of choice. I know there are some extreme situations where someone would argue this. I'm just saying, for most of life, or actually all of life, even extreme situations, you could be tortured, and there are people who have been tortured, but they didn't choose to give up the information, because you always have a choice inside yourself, even at extreme, even in extreme situations. In the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, he wrote, "This is the last and final freedom, man's ability to choose inside themselves what they will do." Viktor Frankl was a Jewish prisoner of war during the Nazi, when they put all the Jewish people in the camp during the Holocaust. And he wrote this book because he said there were people that saved their last piece of bread for someone else who was starving and gave it to them. And they said this was their freedom to not be turned into monsters because of the way that they were treated. So we have much more power of choice than most people would think. Okay, so a reaction is something that's already been downloaded into your system. It's automatic, and I talked about this in the yes generate frame, how you can reframe your questions and reframe your situations in a way where you are, instead of being limited, you have much more power of choice in those situations. So that was the beginning of that. If you want to watch, it's Keep It 100 number 3, Yes Generate Frame. I talked a little bit about this. But a person can actually go about creating their life responding to things instead of reacting. Okay, now you can actually turn what are responses into habitual, downloaded choices ahead of time. So you can take the time in situations that are not extreme, in situations that are, you're not going to be emotionally, your emotions are not going to be heightened and playing upon you, to sit and contemplate and think about, what might I do in this situation? What might I do in this situation? And you can take a lot of possible situations in your life, like things that used to frustrate you in the past, and say, okay, I'm going to think about this, and I'm going to come up with something when I'm just sitting here by myself, when I have the time to think about it, and I'm going to look at some possibilities and maybe brainstorm some options, and that's another skill, brainstorming, that I will teach in a future series. Not in a future series. In this series, Keep It 100, but it's upcoming. I don't know what number it's going to be yet. So you can brainstorm some options, think about some different possible options, and then choose one and say, next time this happens, because maybe it's something that happens over and over and over, and you always feel frustrated or used or abused or something. Well, you can think about it ahead of time and download that in to a point where you have practiced it enough inside yourself that it becomes habitual. And then when you get in that high emotion situation, you will just do what you told yourself you're going to do, and then you will get a different outcome. So what you can do is you can actually take your response, which is a thought about chosen thing that you're going to do, how to respond to a situation, and you can practice your response ahead of time. Tony Robbins said once that you should not be deciding whether you're going to cheat on your spouse in the moment that someone's trying to seduce you. That's not the time to decide, will I do this or will I not? You decide ahead of time. And then if something happens, you're already going to know what your answer is. You're already going to make that good choice, so you don't later on go back and think, oh, I wish I would have thought of this ahead of time. I wish I wouldn't have done that. That really wasn't a good choice. When you don't have time to think is not the time to be making those reactions, because you're going to do something that you're going to regret later. Now, you can't think of every possible situation in life ahead, but a lot of them you can. And a lot of them we already know have been happening over and over and over, and you keep making the same mistake. So you need to go in and think about it and realize there's a choice gap. And then even in that moment, for anything that you have not rehearsed ahead of time, you have not practiced ahead of time, you have not come up with something that you want to try because it might give you a better outcome. When you're in situations and you feel like some stimulus is happening, something is happening upon you, always know that you can take a second and think and say, what outcome do I want? What do I want? What do I want to do here? You can visualize where you want to end up, and you can use that choice gap to take you in the direction of what you visualize. So your response is going to be in the service of taking you where you want to go. So sometimes a reaction, you might do a reaction and you might end up in jail or suspended or on restriction, or these destinations So what you do is going to take you to a particular destination. So what you can do is use that choice gap to say, what destination do I want to go? How do I want this situation to end? Where do I want to be when all is said and done and everything's over? And then what you can do is you can choose the action that's going to take you to the place that you visualized. And I will be doing another upcoming episode on visualizing and taking actions that are going to get you to where you want to go in one of these 100 series on visualization and using how laws of the universe work, that you can make choices, that you can actually predict ahead of time where you're going to go and then take the actions that are going to get you there. So that's upcoming. So that is reaction response choice gap. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you would like to get more of these, subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the bell if you want to be notified when more videos come out. So thank you for joining me on the 100 life skills and strategies from Champion of Champions Coaching. Champion yourself to be a champion every day.